Good afternoon, I'm Steve Gladis, and today I want to talk about a book that I just read that I wanted to share with you. Just a brief piece of it. It's a very comprehensive book. It's by David Rock. It's called Your Brain at Work. It's one of the more important books that I've read recently, and I wanted to just share a small part with you. In the book, Rock talks about the communication between the sort of animal brain that we have, the limbic system, and the prefrontal cortex, the executive director of our brain, the part that keeps us from saying and doing things that we'd be sorry for later on. He talks literally how the brain, the sort of the organizing principle of the brain, is this sort of threat and reward. That as stimuli come into us, they're either seen as threats and rewards. And on a very basic level, you could say a threat of water, or lack of water, or thirst, or those at a very primal level are definitely threats. There are also 5 social threats that he talks about in his book. And those 5 social threats are created a mnemonic called SCARF, S-C-A-R-F, which I think is a brilliant way for him to present this to us so we can remember it, speaking of the brain. And SCARF stands for 5 letters. The S stands for status. So status he's talking about in the book, he talks about status being any threat to somebody's status is an immediate threat to their being, so that when somebody is, for example, boastful in the presence of somebody else, the other person, if they feel a lack of status, will feel threatened. And so that creates a barrier between the two of you. When everybody's speaking to somebody of authority, they automatically feel threatened because of a lack of status. Anytime that you can give people status by being humble, for example, in their presence, or by deferring to them, you increase them wanting to work with you rather than push away from you. So status is the first social threat that we should be aware of and can help us. The second is certainty. And if you wanted to understand certainty recently, look no further than the fiscal cliff and things like that. Whenever people feel uncertain, it feels like a threat. Whenever they feel certain, they feel more calm. Helping other people feel certain in your presence certainly will help you get accepted by them, have them less avoid you and more approach you. So anything you can do of certainty. For example, when there's a bunch of layoffs in a company, making people feel certain about their position is a way of keeping them from leaving the company. So certainty is the second one in this SCARF model. The third is autonomy. And autonomy, when people feel a threat of autonomy, whenever you decide to, for example, change somebody's working hours, or you tell them how to do things, or you're being directive to them, you sort of threaten their autonomy. To the extent that you can let them have autonomy about the way they do things, how they do things, to the extent that you can allow them to give you input, those things all matter in terms of autonomy. So if you want them to approach you and not avoid you, give them more autonomy. The R is for relatedness. And relatedness is simply the person asking themselves, when they deal with you, do they feel like they're on the A team or the B team? The A team meaning, do they feel that they're a part of the process? Do they feel like they're engaged in the process? Do they feel like you care about them? Those sorts of things make people feel more comforted. When you threaten that, when you squeeze them out, don't give them information, when you keep them down, so to speak, in an organization, the chances of them feeling like they're related to the organization, they're engaged in the organization, is pretty nil. And finally, the last one is fairness. And fairness is simply, do we believe that an action or a person is fair? When we believe they're fair, we tend to want to be a part of them. We tend to trust them. When we feel like they're unfair, we want to actually punish them. We want to sort of right the wrong, sort of a Don Quixote-esque about us all. But this idea of fairness is really a pretty principled one. Fairness and status are 2 of the really big ones that you want to be careful with. But certainly status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. The SCARF model by David Rock, I think, is worth paying attention to, and his book, I think, is well worth reading. This is just a very small part of that book. Good luck, and thank you.